안녕하십니까. 오늘 제4회 국제 재난
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 4th International Forum on Disaster Resilience. Thank you very much for your participation. I am today's MC from APDRC, the director of the center, Kim Sun-hee.
오늘 제4회 국제 재난 보건력 세미나에 관심을 가지고 참석해
And taking the interest in the 4th International Forum on Disaster Resilience, we are also joined by a lot of the renowned participants and the distinguished guests. On behalf of the APDRC, we were founded back in 2016 by the Korean Red Cross and the IFRC as the only IFRC's reference center in Asia-Pacific region. So now we can have a lot of the various activities in the strengthening the capacity of resilience as well as the disaster risk reduction. And from now on, we'd like to also continue for the opening ceremony as being co-hosted by the Korean Red Cross, IFRC, UNDRR Office for the Northeast Asia, Korean Society of Hazard Mitigation, and the KCOC, NKEI. Like to officially start the opening ceremony for the 4th International Forum on Disaster Resilience. For today's event, we are also conducting online as well as offline events, as we also provide simultaneous interpretation in English and Korean. For those who like to select the English or Korean for your simultaneous language, please select on the bottom of your Zoom, on the bottom for your language preference. And you can also tune the channel 1 or channel 2 for Korean and for English respectively on the devices for the offline participants.
우리 연사분들께서는 발표 시에만 잠시 마스크를 벗고 말씀하실 예정이십니다. 양해 부탁드리겠습니다.
And for the presenters, we are also asked for the presenters to take off their mask for the smooth progress and communication. We'd also invite the Vice Chairman of Korean Red Cross, the Chang Yesoon, for the opening remarks.
Should I take off the mask, right? Okay.
여러분 안녕하십니까?
Hello, everyone. I am Yesoon Chang, Vice President of the Korean Red Cross. I would like to acknowledge everyone today and welcome all of you. And also, I would like to acknowledge IFRC, UNDRR, ONYA, KCOC, KOSHAM, KEI, and APDRC, the co-organizers of the 4th International Disaster Resilience Forum today. And it's my pleasure to open the forum.
먼저 오늘 이 자리에 대한적십자사 신영 회장님께서
The chairperson, Giyong of the Korean Red Cross, and many others couldn't join us here today due to the parliamentary inspection. So I would like to ask your kind understanding for that. I would like to thank representatives of each organization for their cooperation and support and for the seminar. And I would like to also thank President Jee-chul of KCOC and Ms. Olga Dzhumaeva, head of East Asia Delegation of IFRC, for honoring us with their presence. In this year's forum, we are going to have more meaningful time with Professor Cho, the prominent climate scientist of Korea. I thank the professor for taking his time out of his busy schedule. Also, my thanks go to Secretary General Jee-chul of KCOC and all presenters and discussants for joining us today. Unknowingly, we have already been experiencing climate change-led disasters in our lives. In summer this year, Korea suffered lots of casualties and property damages due to 80-year record-breaking heavy rainfall and typhoon. In Pakistan, Heavy rains twice as heavy as the average downpour at the time of the year resulted in tens of millions of flood victims, whereas Europe was hit by the unprecedented droughts and heat waves, and the U.S. has repeatedly witnessing large-scale wildfires on the country's forests. As such, the world has been suffering. In February 2022, the sixth assessment report of the IPCC was released, and according to the report, between 2010 and 2020, climate disaster-related mortality from the underdeveloped countries was 15 times larger than that of the developed countries. The most afflicted people by climate change are the vulnerable who are vulnerable to disasters. At the end of this year, during the General Assembly of the UN member states declared that climate change and environmental degradation are the biggest crisis of the future humanity and adopted a resolution on the right to live in a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. The resolution made it clear that all humanity on the earth, regardless of their situation, have a right to live a healthy life. Thus, it has a big implication to humanitarian organization. The ICRC movement recognized the importance of the roles and cooperation of humanitarian organizations, and in 2021, the movement developed the Climate and Environment Charter for humanitarian organizations. It has been calling for attention and participation from them. Already in the world, more than 300 humanitarian agencies, including UN agencies and member national societies, have signed up for the Charter, and through activities of climate change adaptation and diverse green responses that put the most vulnerable first, they are preparing for the era of the climate crisis. But we admit and recognize that such activities are not enough. I hope this seminar will be an opportunity for humanitarian organizations to find ways to wisely overcome climate crisis facing humanity and reduce climate-led disaster vulnerabilities in the era of climate crisis.
모색할 수 있는 계기가 될 수 있기를 희망합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you.
네, 부회장님 감사드립니다.
Well, thank you, Vice President.
네, 다음은 국제개발협력 민간협의회
Next, I would like to invite President Jee-chul of KCOC for the welcoming remarks. Please give him a big round of applause.
네, 방금 소개받은 오지철입니다.
As introduced, my name is Jee-chul. Of course, Vice President already mentioned the heat waves and floods, droughts, and wildfire and other natural disasters are continuously hit the world, and no country is free from this natural disaster. Not only the natural disasters, but also the humanitarian assistance are needed by the humanity because they're under war and other disasters. And I believe the most critical crisis, among others, is climate crisis, I think. As I have heard that this is the fourth international seminar. So last year also the topic was on climate change. But when I saw the title, it was a climate change as a topic. But now, when I read that the New York Times this morning that I read from the article, it introduced Nepal's crisis, and it called it not a climate change, but a disaster. So it is now called as a climate disaster and climate crisis, and we all felt seriousness. But we have been indeed very insensitive to such crisis. So now we have to prevent and prepare in advance for these kind of disasters. And if the disasters happened, then we have to equip ourselves with the resilience. And this is maybe the purpose of the seminar, that we should learn from each other on how to strengthen our resilience. And I am the NGO consultative body, and about 140 members are in our organization. They are coming from the Asia Pacific region and Latin American countries, and also many members are dispatched in the Latin American countries and Asian countries doing their work. In order to restore the resilience, I think the solidarity and cooperations are essential. The NGOs and international organizations and governments around the world are making their efforts. However, we need to cooperate to address the climate crisis. And what I felt also is that when there is some situation happens, we are the ones who dispatch first and withdraw the latest. And also for those displaced, then for those who need the relief, we are closely working together with them and for them. Every time when I feel is that the experiences and supports are overlapping, so we are having less effective support, and sometimes we find a blind spot as well. So in order to eliminate this and overcome the challenges, I think it is important for us to share the experiences and also the skills together. So through this kind of a seminar, we have to come up with innovative ideas and pool wisdoms together. And also we have to learn one's insights together as well. About 160 years ago, in the Sulphurous War, the Henri Dunant, the spirit of the humanitarianism that he first initiated, should be shined upon us today, so that we can have a swift relief activities and also assistance to those in the vulnerable situations. And also I'd like to thank the APDRC for organizing this event. And also I'd like to thank all the keynote speakers and presenters, and also the delegation, head of the delegation of the Asia Pacific region, Ms. Olga, and also I'd like to thank all the presentations, and also, last but not least, Mr. Zhou. Thank you.
From now, I would like to invite Olga Dzhumaeva, the head of the East Asia Cluster Delegation of IFRC, for congratulatory remarks.
Dear Vice President of the Korean Red Cross, Yesoon Chang, dear Jee-chul, President of the Korea NGO Council for Overseas Development Cooperation, thank you very much for the pertinent, welcoming remarks, and also for highlighting the urgency to act and to do more together. And on behalf of the IFRC, thank you for inviting me to join this important discussion that aims to explore how we can work together to reduce the extent of climate crisis and strengthen the resilience of local communities. Dear co-hosts, the Asia Pacific Disaster Resilience Center hosted by the Korean Red Cross, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction for Northeast Asia and Global Education and Training Center, Korea NGO Council for Overseas Development Cooperation, Korean Environment Institute, Korean Society of Hazard and Mitigation. It is an honor of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies to co-host this event together with you. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I warmly welcome you all to the 4th International Forum on Disaster Resilience, which built strongly on the outcomes of the 3rd International Forum, which we held last year. A lot has changed since then. Madam Vice President mentioned the IPCC. Indeed, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC's report on impact, adaptation, and vulnerability has launched us into a new era. An era where the whole world sees the climate crisis as a humanitarian crisis unfolding in front of our eyes. And in the past 10 years, 83% of all disasters triggered by natural hazards were caused by extreme weather and climate-related events, such as floods, storms, heat waves, impacting a staggering 1.7 billion people. So indeed, we're seeing dramatic climate-driven impacts across the world, with the food insecurity crisis in Africa, devastating floods in Pakistan, as Madam Vice President highlighted, coastal area loss due to sea level rise in Asia Pacific, heat waves and wildfires across Europe this summer, flooding in the Americas, often hitting the same areas in very quick succession. Asia Pacific is being by far the most disaster-prone region in the world. Republic of Korea saw a wide range of climate and weather-related impacts, ranging from typhoons, heavy rains, forest fires, abnormal temperatures. And we have all been witness that on the 8th of August this year, extreme heavy rainfall in Seoul triggered the highest level of emergency alert, breaking the 80-year-old Seoul record, claiming lives very tragically, displacing people, and causing significant suffering and disruption. So the IPCC made it very clear that reducing greenhouse gas emissions is critical to minimizing impacts on people and planet, and yet we are not on course. And we're very happy to see strong progress that the Republic of Korea is making in climate change mitigation and energy sector planning. And we really look forward to increasing our collaboration with the Republic of Korea as the country seeks to expand its leadership in promoting low carbon and green economy nationally and globally, and in addressing development and humanitarian aspects of climate change. But further, stronger and unified actions of all stakeholders are needed, as we're already struggling to manage today's humanitarian impact of climate change. As this forum convenes a very diverse group of stakeholders, so let us all be intentional and let us seize this opportunity so that we can make further contribution to scalable disaster risk reduction, resilience building, and climate change action. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. 네. 현장에서 축사를 해주신 우리 오지철 회장님 그리고 올가 단장님 감사드립니다.
Thank you very much, the President Jee-chul of the KCOC, as well as Olga, the head of the IFRC. Right, also watch the short video clip.
네, 오늘 첫 축사는 UNDRR 동북아 사무소 및
The first congratulatory remark will be delivered by head of UNDRR and Getty, Mr. Sanjaya Bhatia. And he always participated this forum, but there is a UCLG held in Daejeon right now. The meeting is jointly organized with the UNDRR, so he could not make it today. So now let's listen his congratulatory remarks through the video.
Without doubt, the climate emergency is the biggest threat facing the planet and humanity. 90% of major disasters of the last 20 years have been related to the climate emergency in one way or another. And their impacts make sustainable development unattainable. We also need to realize that not only does the climate emergency impact the most vulnerable, but at the same time, it impacts the vulnerability of the vulnerable, which means those who are already poor or have reduced access to basic services, they are impacted by climate change, making them more vulnerable. And as a result, when non-climate related disasters impact, which could be technological disasters or earthquakes, they impact the people more because of the amplification of their vulnerability due to the climate emergency. So this makes the whole situation even more complex. That's why it is important to reduce disaster risk and avoid creation of new risks. And that is why we need, amongst other frameworks, the Sendai framework for DRR at all levels, global, regional, national, and local. At the same time, climate and disaster risks also amplify conflict situations, which can create breakdown of peace. It can create war, it can create riots, and so on. So what this means is that we need to implement all the global agendas, including the ones on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Sendai Framework, and the Paris Agreement. And what is most important is to get political commitment of the leaders so that they are fully on board to reduce the existing risk and to address creation of new risk. And for this, what we need is high-level advocacy, advocacy of the leaders, of the parliamentarians and others. And this is something which the Red Cross societies can really help in doing. We have also seen that many of the functions that both the humanitarians and the development actors conduct, which includes planning, preparing agreements, building capacities, conducting assessments, and so on, are similar, but differ in the timing when these actions are carried out. So it is important for humanitarian and development actors to focus on the vulnerabilities of the people and to make sure that the short-term humanitarian interventions and the long-term development programs align with each other and address the underlying risk factors and the drivers of risk. Only when all this is aligned can we be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that is what will help us to address the climate emergency also. So I would end by saying that we at UNDRR are happy to collaborate with all of you, including the Red Cross societies around the world, on taking this message and agenda forward. Thank you for your patience.
네, 바로 이어서 한국방재학회 윤기용 회장님.
And next, we would like to also invite the Yoon Giyong from the Korean Society of Hazard Mitigation. Good afternoon. I am the president of Korean Society of Hazard Mitigation, Yoon Giyong. I'd like to also highly appreciate that we have co-hosted the 4th International Forum on Disaster Resilience with the Korean Red Cross in the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, I feel sorry not to have the in-person meeting today, but it's just my great honor to have the online participation for today's forum. I'd like to also thank the Shin Hee-young, president of the Red Korean Cross. I'd like to also extend my gratitude to the president of KEI, Chang, and the president, Jee-chul, of KCOC, and Olga Dzhumaeva, head of EA Cluster Delegation of IFRC, and Sanjaya Bhatia, head of Northeast Asia Delegation of UNDRR. Thank you very much for your contribution. In the era of the climate crisis, Now, the humanitarian activities, including the roles and responsibilities of humanitarian organizations, will be touched upon from the speaker, as well for the keynote speech, and for the panel discussion, and a lot of the innovative, the cooperative mechanisms, and the base cases will be also touched upon for the first session. Thank you very much for your contribution for today's event. Around the world, due to the climate change and global warming, wildfire and heat waves, the droughts are also seeing that a lot of the severe impacts, along with the outdated facilities, severely impacting on our life and livelihood and properties of the human beings. As we have also got through a lot of the typhoons and the heat waves and heavy rains in Korea, and we have also experienced a lot of the aggravating impacts due to the climate crisis. In this regard, the more complexity, diversity, and the more unity are definitely essential for the individuals and communities to really enhance the capacities against the climate crisis. I do really hope that we can also utilize today's event as a valuable platform for sharing innovative cases and ideas so that we can have more flexible and agile against the climate crisis. Lastly, I'd like to also thank the Korean Red Cross, Asia Pacific Office, and the APDRC. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you. Lastly, I'd like to also listen to the congratulatory video from the President Chang of KEI. Good afternoon. I am Chang, President of KEI. I'd like to sincerely congratulate the 4th International Forum on Disaster Resilience with the theme of humanitarian activities in the climate crisis era. I am also great privilege to give the congratulatory remarks. I'd like to also thank the President Shin Hee-young of the Korean Red Cross and all the representatives for preparing this event. My also especially the thanks also go to the speakers and the presenters and panelists around the world, as we have seen the unprecedented the climate crisis with disasters in Europe, with the heat waves, wildfires, and one of the very worst the disasters in 500 years in Europe. And Pakistan, more than 30 million people have also suffered from a lot of the impacts of natural disasters. We have also undergone a lot of the casualty and a lot of the severe impacts from the climate change and the crisis in Korea as well. That's our reality. IPCC, the 6th report published as of the last year, around the world, the average temperature rise has already risen by 1.5 degrees Celsius. And by this century, the report is also forecasting to see that the average temperature rise exceeding actually 1.5 degrees Celsius. Around the world, if we see the exceeding the temperature around the world beyond the 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's a reality, and that's a very high possibility that we may face. In this regard, our roles and responsibilities are more crucial. But before we face the daunting challenges and reality, we have to enforce the disaster resilience upon the coordination with a lot of the communities. In this regard, back in 2019, KEI has also established one of the climate crisis, the support center with the government support. In the climate crisis, the public awareness and the support programs, project, as well as activities for the vulnerable group, and upon the collaboration models, we also have done a lot of the efforts to conduct the research and developments for the strengthening the disaster resilience. But from the research perspective, it's a reality we may face a lot of limitations. So I do really hope that we can listen to your fruitful ideas and discussions today. For today's seminar, I do really hope that this seminar is a very valuable platform. In this regard, I would like to also understand the more ideas and the cases and actions for the humanitarian activities based on your discussion today. I'd like to also sincerely Hope that we can have the successful completion of today's international forum. I wish you best success and health in the future. Thank you very much.